Okay, well, welcome everybody and thank you for coming to the session. I'm Nathan from Turbot and I'm very, very excited to be here in India and in Mumbai. First, I was excited to be in India so I could visit our office in Kolkata, meet our great team there. Then I saw the IPL final on the weekend with that amazing last ball victory for Mumbai, so I was even more excited. And then finally today here at the summit, so many thousands of people working through the question of how to move to cloud, how to get their enterprise ready, amazing conversations. So it's great to be here. So today what I'm going to talk to you about is governance. And what we mean by governance is really this question of how you're going to look after your environment and move with great agility while it's also keeping it in control. The agility of cloud is very, very powerful, something we're trying to grab as much as fast as we can. But we have to do it in a way where we're staying in control and keeping ourselves safe. And that's what governance does. Just like the normal government you live under every day tries to provide you with those services and those capabilities while also really enabling your freedom, that's what we're trying to provide for either our customers, our clients, or our internal teams when we think about the cloud. So what do we mean by governance when we're talking about that? Is basically how do we protect you? How do we educate our users? How do we set up that infrastructure and the rules to give them that level of freedom? Before we get into that though, it's important to think, why is this different from what we did before? Often we think of cloud as just being a virtual representation of things we've done before, and it's not. There's a number of things that make it uniquely different. The first is just the sheer pace of movement of the cloud. Amazon's adding 1,000 new features a year. 1,000 new features a year. You can't compete with this, with your internal little IT team and building your own little capabilities. You need to think instead about how you're going to ride this rocket. How do you enable these capabilities for your business? Not competing with them, instead enabling them. How do you let them use RDS with all those capabilities? How do you let them use KMS? How do you let them go serverless? If you don't, you'll get run over. The second thing we have to be aware of is the fundamental shift in power. Application teams are now starting to control the infrastructure. Previously, infrastructure was something where a team held the budget, they built the servers, they had the physical assets, they controlled what went where. And it just doesn't work that way anymore. Application teams now provision their own infrastructure, auto-scaling, serverless. They're doing those things in real time. The idea that you'll manually review requests is gone. As we move forward, that's becoming a software problem. Coupled with all that agility, of course, we have to think about control in new ways. Specifically, the first one is expectations on getting control right are so high now, we can't miss. If you miss and your public bucket is found, you're in the paper. Right? If you miss, why didn't you encrypt your data? KMS is there. Why didn't you encrypt in transit? You can do that with certificates. What, you're not running guard duty? You have to be doing every single one of these things. These new capabilities are amazing and powerful. But the responsibility we have to deliver them goes up with every single one that comes out. And that comes back to that pace of change and thinking about how you're going to keep up with that as a team. At Turbot, we believe what that means is that the change from this physical infrastructure to this software-defined infrastructure is coupled with a change towards software-defined operations. If your application teams can change your infrastructure in real time, which is the goal of cloud, right? If you're not doing that, you're doing it wrong. You need operations that can change in real time along with those applications. You need enforcements that work in real time. So we have to think about how to move forward from a place where we're chasing tickets, handling incidents, to a place where we're killing those tickets with automation. We never ever want to see those issues again. We want automation and software to move them away. We start with scripts. Most people start with scripts. But where you end up is running full software for your operational stack. Now, as we're trying to enable our business with that agility and control, the next thing we have to think about is how we're going to accelerate them, give them best practices, make them move faster. And for that, what we've found is that a clear, consistent architecture is the fundamental building block. We used to hand build networks, hand configure a server, name things carefully, treat them like pets, to use that term. Now we need to think in much broader strokes. We need to think about how we're going to deliver on something like a 10-minute server. To do that, we need a full end-to-end capability for that stack. Who can log in? How can they log in? What's a valid server? How do we name that server based on its IP? By the way, it might get stopped and started with a new IP, right? So you've got to be able to handle every single one of those things with a clear, automated architecture design. And that requires significant and difficult thought, and particularly at large scale. When our customers are running hundreds of Amazon accounts with hundreds of applications, auto-scaling servers, all those sorts of things inside there, you need a consistent approach to that. The other, I think, very profound change that we're going through, and particularly for those who think about services, is that we're really moving from a pattern of support to a pattern of help. When things were done through requests, we would create a request, and then we'd try to fulfill that request. So we were used to the idea that we could ask for things, check on status. We end up with a project manager on the infrastructure side, arguing with a project manager on the application team side. What's your status? Where are you at? Etc. Now, when you rethink that in the world of a 10-minute server, what happens? You come to the meeting and say, I need a server. Okay, start it. It's over, right? So that world changes from one of chasing down requests, chasing down support, and instead helping people to get it done. Help me start a server. Help me provision storage. Help me get serverless running. The cloud team, the support teams are now helping those application teams. Application teams hold more of the capability, budget, journey, and the cloud team's job is to help them. So for us, as we've thought about that, we started to think about what does governance mean in the age of the cloud. And we broke it down to a few key things. And the first one of those is you've got to come up with what your rules and regulations are. Just like any society. How do you want to work? You can start with compliance frameworks and standards. They're awesome. But if you think about your enterprise and your organization and how it really works, there's a policy here that says how we're going to store data. There's another policy there that says how we're going to name servers. There's Joe over in the network team who knows how we create route tables and happens to name them in a certain way or do those things in a certain way. There's a whole bunch of enterprise knowledge caught up in people as well as policies, procedures. If you're going to automate that, you have to codify it, standardize it, think about it in well-named, well-architected, repeatable ways. Everything, naming standards, IP ranges, server types, server naming schemes, the whole thing needs to be rules and regulations because you're an enterprise. And you know there's going to be an exception, right? Everything's encrypted except for that one there because it's a special project with a thing. There's always exceptions. So not only do you need the rules, you need the ability to think about them with exceptions and with the capability to adjust and change those. Second, we have this concept of infrastructure. To us, that means, what are the core capabilities we're laying down in that environment to accelerate our application teams? Networking, for example, obvious one. Logging buckets, turning on CloudTrail, setting up your different governance components. How do we speed you up? So at Turbot, we think of that in certain terms of automating all the things you don't care about but are very important. If you create a Dynamo table, backup should be turned on. If you create an S3 bucket, it should be automatically encrypted, right? And you need that whole flow of infrastructure accelerating and speeding up your teams. That does not mean abstracting them. I'll come back to that in a minute. As you speed them up, of course, and as we move to this world of helping, not supporting, education is critical. We're the cloud experts, right? Imagine as we scale that to our application teams, how are they going to keep up with that 1,000 features? How do they think about encryption and all those capabilities? So what we need to do is find a way to help our juniors and help our freshers and give them the ability to use the cloud with speed and scale without making mistakes, right? Learning from that, watching how it changes around them and fixes things around them so they know why that's important. And by the way, this is so much harder than it was even 5 years ago. If you had a young programmer 5 years ago, they'd learn Java, right, or whatever. Now what are they learning? I need Java, I need some serverless, I got to run a thing here, I need a KMS key talking to my SQS queue, sending a thing there. That is a massive amount of information to absorb, but that's the standard architecture for something like a serverless app, right? So we have to work out how we're going to educate and speed these people up. Now, normally when we think about guardrails and governance, we all go to security and protection. Protection from external forces and protection from internal problems. And it's critical, and we spend a lot of time thinking and talking about it, and it's the perfect use case. But what do we mean by that protection? What we mean is real-time automated fixes to your infrastructure. If the application team now has the power to create things, could be in their app, could be in the console, right? We need a way to react to that and automatically fix and help them in real time. We can't go and check it, send them a note later and spend our whole life playing whack-a-mole on tickets, right? We have to do automated response to that. We want to kill those tickets and automate those problems away. At Turbot, what we do is we watch what's being created in that environment through the software. If they create an S3 bucket within 10 seconds, we turn on the encryption, set the tags, turn on the access logging, 12 other things. Real-time remediation means you don't have any chance to really do it wrong. And you don't have to then review something at the end. By the way, when you're stuck between a deadline and the business, right, that is the worst time to review something. Instead, if you're enforcing it from the start, those things are done in development, they move through QA, and if they don't work at the start, they're not going to work. You can go through exceptions and work through that process earlier. Without automated real-time enforcement, you lose control of that sequence and that priority. Now, as we mentioned at the start, the sum total of all those things is to give freedom. What do I mean by freedom in this context? We mean business agility, the ability to create an application to deliver on that need, the ability to try serverless, to use queuing. Like, why not, right? If you have the budget and we know it's encrypted and we know it's patched, why would I stop you? What incentive does any cloud team or central control team have to slow you down in that circumstance? And as we automate more and more of those pieces away, we can give that freedom. We can give people the chance to use the console. We can give them the chance to use the API. In our mind, the fundamental point of that freedom is not to abstract them from the cloud experience. Your developers need CloudFormation, they need Terraform, they need the console, they need APIs. If you say everything runs through a pipeline in Terraform, you've abstracted them from the cloud and you've made their job slower and more difficult. I'm not saying you shouldn't use it. You should use it. But it's part of that learning experience about how will I develop, creating things by hand, making mistakes, having a chance to retry them, right? We need to give people the freedom to experiment in that way. Now, when you get that combination of policies with exceptions, with automated rules, right, you can now that freedom gives you the chance to learn in whole new ways. In particular, you can work with an application team and say, you know what, we never really used your DynamoDB before. I'm not sure what our requirements are, but I'm going to give you an exception for 90 days. You learn with this. You work with us as the central cloud team or the services team, and we'll work this out together. That's a completely different experience from the we don't support that, right, world that we used to be in. And if you have those automated guardrails, you can speed up that whole process. I would love to do a demo, but I don't trust the internet, so I'm going to skip that. I'm happy to talk about that later at the booth or set you up if you'd like to see it. Instead, what I'm going to do is continue talking about the concepts, which, if I did the demo, I'd show you why Turbot does it better than anything else. But for now, the key thing is to show you why these concepts are important. The first one is, if you get this right, the speed you can move increases drastically. Now, speed has two dimensions to me. The first one is, what's the speed of my application teams? I give them an Amazon account. They can create resources, they can try serverless, they can run stacks, they can do all those things quickly and easily in that environment. The second concept of that speed is as that central team for controls, how do I enable those services and those rockets for my business? If you're trying to do all of that by hand, writing scripts, you're moving too slow. Something like Turbot, we have 1,700 policies out of the box. So you go from 0 to enterprise at the point of installation. Imagine starting to form a team and thinking about all the meetings you're going to have around identity access, networking, all those things to solve those problems in a common, well-named way. You can do the first 10 pretty easy, and after that, it gets exponentially difficult. The second benefit when you get this concept of governance right is safety. We had one customer, a DevOps-focused customer. They were originally trying to do everything through pipelines, and the central team collapsed under the weight, right, of all of those requests, right? So they're like, okay, we have to enable these application teams. They're banging on our door to do stuff. So through guardrails, they were able to do that. Now, what happened? What's the first thing that happens? Someone creates an S3 bucket, tries to make it public. Oh, you're stopping me making my bucket public. Well, why did you want a public bucket? Well, I have to publish the keys from my CI server. It's like, you're trying to use an external CI server to talk to a public bucket to get keys to give you creds for that? This is just a bad pattern, right? And we wouldn't know unless we were in the way of that user doing it or reacting in real time. That's the type of safety you get across all these things. If they weren't doing anything stupid, they just could keep going. But instead it created the right point of friction, the right point of guardrail to have that conversation. Accessibility. The key here is, how do we make this cloud more available to more of our developers? If it's only available to our biggest experts, then we're losing. We need our juniors to be able to use it. We need our freshers to be able to get started. We need the ability to give them that level of power without the fear of what they might do. That's making the cloud more accessible to all of our development teams and all of the people in our organization, which moves us forward faster. When you get this level of split up and accountability and responsibility right, the productivity impact is incredible. We've seen this at multiple organizations where you get that first 10-minute server that everyone agrees is an official server. It goes viral. Nobody can go back to the 6-week server. There's no way back. Once you get automated encryption of your buckets, you think your security team's ever going to let you create something internally again where there is no encryption? Right? It speeds you up, moving you forward in the right ways, right? Gives you better productivity. One story I enjoy in that is we had a team, they were just using S3 in an account, very simple case. And it turns out their bill was $70, and they were so upset. They come in like, $70, what's going on? This should be nothing. And we're like, fine, let's look at the details. They were making 100 million requests to S3, right? And this was just a small mobile app. Turns out they had a bug in their application that was constantly polling the server, right? So we fixed that, they go away, fix that bug, their bill drops to 0. But what was the real impact? All of those mobile phone batteries in the organization stopped draining so quickly, and they would never have known if they hadn't had the depth of knowledge and understanding of their account sitting isolated with their own bill, with their own responsibility. Normally we'd just lose $70 in the noise, right? When you can bring that up and make it accountable, you can see that together. The other thing that we think is super important as you're moving forwards with the world of governance is this. Something like Turbot, we're covering 1,700 policies across all those different services. We're getting feedback from all those organizations, moving that together in a single place. That's the power of that software and that reuse. If you think this is a scripting problem, you're fighting against that. You're trying to hack some stuff in for yourself. That level of breadth and that level of depth, no one organization team can compete with. That's the difference between trying to ride a rocket versus trying to tinker to build one in your own garage, right? It's fun tinkering, I enjoy it. Right, but that level of speed, breadth, and depth you can't do unless you accept that operations has become a software problem. Doesn't matter how many humans you throw at it, you can't keep up with that level of consistency, pace, and speed. And finally, as you do all of that, of course, you can get comfortable with the speed of cloud because now you've got someone in your corner who's helping you do those things right from the start. And you've automated so many of the existing ones, you don't have to worry because you've got the time to think about what's new. If you're constantly chasing the old tickets, you're going to be stuck. So I'm Nathan, I'm from Turbot. We have a booth over there if you'd like to talk to me or any of the team. We'd love to talk to you more about governance. We live, breathe, and sleep this. So if you have any questions, please come over and let us know. Thank you very much.